Hey everyone. You know, I can't believe it's been this long, but almost 15 years ago, my AA sponsor and I were talking after a meeting. And you don't need to be in AA or any 12 steps to appreciate this podcast, I promise. But we were talking after a meeting, and there was a share that she wanted me to reflect about. And when I began to explain to her that there really wasn't much that I could relate to about the share, she looked at me and she said, "Drop the rock." And I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about, so I kind of started to laugh. And she just stared at me, which I knew from experience meant she wasn't kidding. And so I told her, I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And she said, "Your ego." And she started to share the parable with me. And as I listened to her, I realized I really had some pretty deep core work to do. Even though I thought I had done a ton already, it was obvious I had some more to do. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm your host, Life Coach Laura, and I believe that when we're facing challenges, we can do that through hope and action. Dropping the rock means that we are letting go of our character flaws or defects, and we have the ability to change them into character strengths. And like I said, you don't have to be in 12 steps to relate to this podcast. So the parable goes, a group of 12-step members set sail on the ship Recovery, and they're going across the Sea of Life. And they're headed towards the island of Serenity. And shortly after the ship pulls away from the dock, the passengers realize that not everyone's on board. And sure enough, they see one of their friends, Mary, and she's running onto the dock. And the people on the boat cheer her on. They're like, "Dive in! Swim, Mary, swim! You can do it, you can do it! Come on, Mary!" And so Mary dives into the water, and she swims towards the boat with all of her might. And yet, as she gets close to the ship, she is struggling to stay afloat. It's clear to her friends why. They can see that there is a heavy rock that hangs from a snarl of strings around Mary's neck. So they all start shouting, "Drop the rock! Drop the rock! Let the rock go!" Mary realizes that this rock contains all of her fear, resentment, self-pity, anger, intolerance, and other characteristics that she wants to change. And she also realizes that if she doesn't let them go, she will drown. So she tears off the strings, holds the rock away from her, and lets it go. She is freed of the heavy and useless weight. Mary easily swims the rest of the way to the ship. She climbs aboard, dripping and deeply relieved. As we move through our recovery and healing journey, we learn to recognize and let go of character defects. We let go of the shortcomings and negative attitude that would sink us. We not only free ourselves to become the people we want to, but we also cause a ripple effect on those around us. So it's a pretty good parable, right? So I remember reading that and I was like, yeah, that's pretty powerful, right? Because when we have acts of humility and willingness and courage, that causes a positive and a healing ripple effect on one another. So my sponsor was right. I needed to work out my ego. And one of the things that she had said to me that day was that ego stood for easing God out. Now, I am not one to talk about my faith with many people, and I'm not going to here. But hearing that from her, it added to the gigantic chip that I already carried on my shoulder. Because the first thing that popped into my head was, like, who is she to challenge my relationship with God? Especially because that's just not something I talk about to people. And then after I sat with it and reflected on it, I realized she's right. Like, she wasn't questioning my relationship with my higher power. She was asking me to reflect on the fact that I was putting myself as the highest power in every situation. So now I get to admit to you guys an example of that. So, despite my lack of knowledge in the world of recovery, because I've shared before that I was clean from my DOC for a decade before I even walked into the rooms, right? So, despite my lack of knowledge of having any kind of recovery tools, I still thought I knew best, right? Despite my lack of knowledge in the world of trauma, I still thought I knew best. You know, what was best for me, what was best for others, because I had been going to counseling for 6 months. I had been going to meetings for 6 months, and therefore I had all this knowledge that I just felt like I could just start spreading it everywhere. But the more I looked at it, I realized I was too afraid to ask for help because I carried so much shame about my childhood abuse. I knew it wasn't my fault, and yet it still filled me with so much shame. And plus the things I did during my addiction, like, I just felt unworthy, like I was a burden to other people. And it felt like so much weight to carry. It didn't matter how many times people would say, call me, that's what I'm here for. I still struggled picking up the phone. And that's where that phrase comes, right? That 300-pound phone. I'm curious, is that something that you struggle with too? Because if you do, you're definitely not alone. And so I decided I'm going to change my mindset. I'm going to retrain my brain. And I would make sure that I understood that not only am I worth picking up the phone for, that I'm worthy of asking for help, but one day, excuse me, I'm sorry, um, I would be someone that people could turn to and ask for help, not just dictate, because that's what I did. At like 6 months, I was like dictating what people should do with their recovery, and that is just so wrong. And so I stopped doing that. And um, yeah, and so I started learning about emotional sobriety. Um, and I had to learn about humility. And with time, my perspective changed. And I learned that everyone's recovery, everyone's healing is going to look different. The way that I do things and the way that you do things are unique. Just like your journey is different than mine and my journey is different than yours. There's no one way to do things. And so I think that when what I was doing was judging people, and that was just wrong. And so I changed. And the important thing is that we just keep moving forward in a positive direction and understand that all of us are just a constant work in progress. And I just continue to invest in myself and learn through the help of others. And a really great, I actually listened to a TED talk and by Brene Brown, and it was the difference between shame and guilt. And she was absolutely amazing. I highly recommend uh, looking up this TED Talk. I believe you can find it um, like Shame versus Guilt. Just look up Brene Brown, Brene Brown. But this quote in particular, it's shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. How many of you, if you did something that was hurtful to me, would be willing to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? How many of you would be willing to say that? Guilt, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Shame, I'm sorry, I am a mistake. Like, what a powerful quote that is, right? And so I understood what happened to me as a child and a young adult wasn't my fault. I was the victim, and I needed to learn how to become the victor. And I had to do that through healing. So if any of you can relate to that, I really recommend looking up Brene Brown. So when my so when my sponsor asked me to list my flaws, I gave her three, you know, because I only had three. If you could see me, you would know I was rolling my eyes. And so she promptly handed them back to me, and she asked me to do some reflecting. So I did what any good sponsee does. I don't know how she stayed with me for so long, I swear. So I Googled character defects for the fourth step in AA. And yeah, nearly passed out at how many I found that applied to me. And yeah, because I was being honest with myself. Because when she wouldn't accept three, I was like, wow, okay, fine. Um, yeah, but the cool thing was, I also found that these could be turned into my strengths, and that's the same for you too. And that was also at the point where I decided I really needed to do a deeper dive, and I went over and did the workbook for a blueprint for progress. But anyway, but I realized, for instance, I tended to be way too blunt. I still work on that because sometimes I'll lean that way because of where I'm from, but I had no filter, and so I learned to communicate much better, and I have turned that into being open and honest, but without hurting people's feelings. I also used to be bullheaded and stubborn, and uh, where it was either just my way or no way at all. And now I communicate and am open minded and receptive. And as a result, I've become determined. I also had very black and white thinking where it was either this way or that way. And now I understand there is a gray area. Like, what a concept, right? There's gray area? What? And now I'm organized. And then there are characteristics that I had to learn to let go of. And again, I'm still a work in progress on some of this, of course, but the first on the list was compulsiveness. And this is something I will always have an awareness of, and why I always say I do something in recovery um, every day for at least 20 minutes a day. because I always need to have that awareness that I'm in recovery for my addiction. Control. I loved control. That was a big thing for me. I liked to control everything because my world was so chaotic inside my head. So if I had something outside of my brain that I could control, no matter how minute that was, whether it was like cleaning or dinner or whatever, I wanted to control it. And that sometimes meant people too, especially right after I quit using. And the problem was, I couldn't control a situation or people. And so I would just be miserable. And it caused me a lot of anxiety, and that led to triggers, and it was just bad. So I really had to learn how to let go of that. And that was definitely a process, and probably one that needs a whole podcast of its own. Uh, Note to self, do a podcast on letting go of control. I was passive aggressive, and all I can say was I was probably the queen of passive aggressiveness. You probably ask my husband. But yeah, and yeah, you could probably look up passive aggressive and see my face in the dictionary. So now I say what I mean, and I mean what I say, and I'm polite most of the time. I try. And of course, my ego. I needed to learn how to be humble. And I realized as I did my core work that I had been looking for others to validate me because I wasn't able to validate myself. I needed others to fill this void that I couldn't seem to fill without using or without fixing other people. So as I settled into my emotional recovery, my emotional sobriety, I recognized my own worth, my own value. And I understood that the only person who could make me feel whole was me. And I didn't need to make all my presence felt all the time, because I had a tendency to just jump in and say things, and I didn't need to make my voice heard every second of every moment. Because I used to be in a support group and an online support group, and I actually had well, actually, I'm looking at it right now, it's still on my wall. I have a reminder on my wall. It says, work for a cause, not for applause. Live life to express, not to impress. Don't strive to make your presence noticed, make your absence felt. Um, and so those are just a few of the rocks that I needed to drop. And as a result, I've been able to do what I've always wanted, which is to help others along their journey. So I do that through clients, I do that through volunteer work, and that has caused a ripple effect, not just in other people's lives, but also inside my home, my family, my work. Everything has settled. It's calm, it's peaceful, there's harmony. It's just something I never thought that I would have. So, what rocks would you like to drop? What characteristics would you like to change? What ripple effect would you like to cause in your home, in your personal space, or at your job, in other people's lives? Because it can help to think, if you're struggling with that, it can help if you think of a role model, someone you admire or you aspire to be like. You can write out the qualities you like about them and why. Just journal it out. If you need help with journaling, I just did a podcast on that last week. It can be somebody who's famous or somebody in your family or a friend you know. Have a picture of them, and on the back of the picture, out, write it out, and then carry it with you. If you're having a trigger, you can take that picture out and read the inspirations, why they inspire you. If you can relate to feeling victimized, now is a great opportunity to become a victor. Sometimes that means finding a healthy support system. whether that's a life coach, counseling, a support group, 12 steps, whatever it is, surround yourself with healthy, like-minded people. You do not have to do this alone. There are people who want to help. Again, gratitude. Don't look at the glass half empty or half full. Be grateful for the glass. Challenge yourself to be mindful of something, to be grateful for each and every day, and really, just challenge yourself. Don't make it like, yeah, I'm glad I'm sitting in this chair right now. Be grateful about something deeper, and invest in yourself with self-care. I'm not going to bore you because I talk about it so often, but again, everything from boundaries to counseling, eating well, sleeping, exercising, hydration, journaling, hobbies, awareness of your triggers, dedicating your time to your recovery, 20 minutes a day. That self-care, investing in yourself, that's such an important part of this. Dropping the rock, just invest in yourself. And remember, give yourself grace. If you have a setback, don't shame yourself. Learn from it. Ask yourself, why did I have this setback? Reflect on it. Put plans in place so it won't happen again, and then move forward. But drop the rock on shame. If you're going through this and you're like, okay, so this is the goal that I want to set. I want to drop the rock on, blah, blah, blah. Create manageable goals, because sometimes we make our goals so big and then we can't achieve them. And then you're like, oh, great, now I'm a failure, so I'm just not going to do that again. If you create a goal to drop the rock on something, give yourself time and then give yourself credit for what you've done. And if you don't make it at that time, it's okay. Try again and keep moving forward. And don't forget, celebrate yourself. You deserve it. You absolutely deserve it. You're on this journey, and give yourself credit for being on the journey in the first place. So, thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, want an appointment, just need, a pat on the back, or you want some free worksheets, please visit my website, lifecoachlaura.org, lifecoachlaura.org. You are all superstars. Have a beautiful day. You deserve it. Keep being amazing. You guys got this. I'm rooting for you.